Hey team, welcome back to another episode of the Strength Game Podcast. I'm your host, Nick O'Brien, and this is episode number 111. The Strength Game is a weekly podcast dedicated to discussing all things physical culture, both the coaches, athletes, iron enthusiasts, and experts deeply embedded in the strength game on both sides of the profession, both as coaches and as competitive athletes. I want to thank everyone who has liked, shared, commented, who has given us suggestions for guests and provided us feedback over the years. That support allows us to continue to bring on expert guests and highlight more individuals in the strength game, just like our guests today. I also want to thank our sponsors. Family owned and operated since 1976, Samson Equipment has been specializing in full turnkey weight room buildouts from planning to installation. Based in Las Cruces, New Mexico, Samson provides professional weight room solutions for those looking to lead the way in advancing our strength and conditioning profession. Coaches have relied on Samson as their top resource for all their weight room renovations because they provide the finest materials and design, product customization, and the most reputable customer service in the business. If you're in the market for elite level strength equipment, weight room renovations, or upgrades, be sure to check out SamsonEquipment.com to see how Samson has been providing and delivering clients a long-lasting yet affordable product for over 4 decades. Also want to thank our sponsor, Cerberus Strength. Since 2012, Cerberus is making the best strongman, powerlifting, and strength sports equipment and accessories, ensuring the ultimate competitive edge. Every one of their products is tried, tested, and proven by top-level athletes worldwide. So if you're in the market for the highest quality strength and conditioning gear and equipment, be sure to check out CerberusStrength.com and use promo code STRENGTH_game to save on your next order. I also want to thank our sponsor, Sport Kilt. Originally founded in 1995, Sport Kilt is the very first company to begin making casual kilts in the USA. Taking the traditional kilt concept, they crafted a casual kilt using modern materials that is perfect for Highland athletes and the casual kilt aficionado alike. Sport Kilt offers an option for people looking for a tartan plaid kilt that is less expensive, comfortable, lighter, and durable, yet machine washable. So whether you're competing in Highland Games, connecting with your heritage, or just casually spending some time around the house, or trying to stand out from a crowd, Sport kilts are made for everyone and for every occasion. Make the ultimate Celtic statement by checking out the full selection of kilts and stylish kilt accessories at sportkilt.com, and be sure to use our promo code TSG to save at checkout. And in this week's episode, I am joined by John Odden. John is the owner and head coach of Empowered Strength. Located in Bend, Oregon, Empowered Strength offers in-person and online coaching for athletes, business coaching, and both in-person and online Highland Games programming and clinics. Prior to starting his own business, Odden worked in the clinical setting and as an exercise physiologist and employee wellness coordinator at PeaceHealth, in addition to being a high school strength coach for over 10 years before retiring from his clinical position and relocating to Bend, Oregon to start Empowered Strength back in 2014. Since that time, he has been training and rehabilitating clients in both the personal training and clinical setting. He also is a mace, Indian club, and kettlebell instructor. Odden himself has a myriad of athletic accomplishments and boasts as an athlete. He was a #1 ranked Scottish Highland Games lightweight class athlete in both 2016 and 2017. It was a 2017 lightweight national champion, 2021 Masters Highland Games world champion, and 6-time world record holder. Additionally, he is a former heavyweight professional athlete from 2010 to 2014 in the Highland Games, competitive Olympic lifter in the 94 kilo Masters class, and has competed in multiple StrongFirst challenges and strongman throughout his lifting career. Odden has also successfully lifted the Dinnie Stones and many other legendary stones in Scotland. I'm excited to have him on the show today. So with all that said, let's get in the game with Coach John Odden. What's going on, everybody? Today we have Coach John Odden on the show. How are you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. Great to be here.
Hey, I'm excited to have you on. We've been talking, and I know I eventually at some point I have to hit record. So we had to
Exactly.
stop what we were doing ahead of time so that we could actually share it with the rest of the audience because don't want to miss out on any of the good stuff that you got for us today. So hey, without any further ado, really want to get to how you got started in the strength game, lifting. You've done a lot of strength sports over the course of your career, but been a professional Highland Games athlete and lightweight champion, world champion. So, how'd you kind of get started leading in the Highland Games and kind of what you're doing nowadays throughout your lifting career?
Yeah, I guess I'll go through a little bit of the origin story of the very beginning. And I think it was one of your recent guests. I think it was Zach Evanish. I just caught what he said about the He-Man. Like I'm an '80s child, just in that edge of that Gen X and proud of that. I'm 44 now, so we were all, at least somewhat exposed. You couldn't get away from it. There was muscly men everywhere. He-Man was what Zach mentioned too. And I'm like, that actually truly was. I thought about this back in one of my articles I did a while back. I'm like, it had to be He-Man. I was done for just seeing this guy, and everybody was jacked. I was like gaslighted by my TV back in the days before all the media. Like, well, that's just what you got to be. You got to be a superhero. You got to be something cooler. And even Superman or some of the definitely the action heroes. Get Stallone, Schwarzenegger. You had, those guys were much bigger action stars, and that's another topic I think of itself of this, feminizing of action heroes versus we were in the hyper masculine. I think we were overdone, and there was obviously a lot of and still is a lot of this smoke and mirrors, or drugs and health versus the performance side of things and things you didn't realize, but heavily influenced there. And just I don't know, it just always appealed to me, and really proud of that now. And I just felt like I was out in my own little world as a 12-year-old kid, begging my parents to get me this plastic weight set from Target and saving my money, and like, oh, we got to go over there. I think this will fit in the car and not weigh it down too much. And of course, your parents are scared for you, but also like, okay, this tall, skinny kid probably makes sense. And my dad did some lifting and encouraged that too. But my mom was like, you're gonna hurt yourself for that typical stuff. And now it's thankfully or refreshingly very great to see nobody really gives I can't think of the last client or somebody. Maybe once in a while you get a little like, oh, she doesn't want to get too bulky for a gymnast or something like that, within reason. Or you get the sometimes there's men now too, right, where they'll still say, I don't want to get too bulky, do this and that, but it's like everybody, they've pre-qualified. So something I take a lot of pride in. Like, I had enough of this vision, or just this sense of awareness. So it's like before all these waves of everything, from just the transition from all this machine based, just the gym was its thing, and you're going to get muscle bound, to the emergence of CrossFit and the Olympic lifting things that I was doing, and my college days, my early exercise science days, and actually deadlifting, let alone squatting with a bar. And then if you were doing Olympic weightlifting, people were looking at you like you had two heads back in the early 2000s, and wanting to compete. And just the physical culture. I'm sure you get a lot of your guests on. I am now more than ever, let's say, obsessed, or I'd almost rather go backwards. I can't help not knowing what the newest research or what the newest podcast says, and get like we say, chase those shiny things. But at the same time, it's really just very I don't know, refreshing, and feels very rich, I guess, to go back in time. I'm looking right now at my stone lifting poster from Scotland, all this physical culture stuff, this rites of passage, just going back into these old different cultures with Indian clubs. And of course the Highland Games fits into that too, and good segue into that, I guess, too. And I was always athletic throughout my my days, and very respectful. Like, I loved the gym. I really did know I wanted to be in the strength and conditioning world, and into basically what I'm doing now. I was so shy, so afraid, so just lacking that confidence. I can definitely speak to that. Hopefully this inspires a few people maybe along the way. And I moved. Part of it was definitely I moved 2 times in high school, and we had moved quite a bit with my dad's career and that too. So I think that was a big part of it, and just having that really driven dad who was a high level athlete, something to aspire to, and this mom who was very non-athletic, very passive, like don't hurt yourself, don't do this, but I still encourage you. So it's like I had these mixed things going on, and didn't really go after that. I really stopped after my second move into early high school. I was just like, I'm gonna take a break. And I was just again a tall, skinny kid. But I always lifting became my everything. My therapy. My I love the article. If people haven't seen that, it's called, I think, The Iron by Henry Rollins. I shared that. I got to share that one with my daughter the other day. I don't think she totally picked up on it, but it's like I'm getting to share these things I wish I would have found earlier, and I just love still like stumbling onto that kind of stuff. And I think you asked that in one of your questions, like some of your, and this was early, just by the time going through high school, finish that part quick and then segue into where the Highland Games coming around to that. But it was just like I didn't feel confident enough, and I just wasn't loving that process. I didn't have this coach. I'm a little bit more I don't know if you say high maintenance or just need a little bit more, like I got so much to give, but I really like that coach that's there along with you. I can go, and now I've developed that where I just have gone so far. I've just transcended that. I know what I need to do, what I'm willing to do, and of course I still like that support. I need that support on a basic level, but I just didn't have that person pouring into me, or that group we just didn't value it enough. So I just dug into school, the gym, and working. I went to work, all that crazy idea. It was nothing bad. I didn't fall off and into the abyss and get all into crazy stuff, thankfully. But I just dug in, like, okay, I'm going to focus on these things for whatever reason at the time. And then finally came back around. It's like, as the internet started to grow, it's so funny to say now, but like there was so little information out there. And, I stumbled onto, it was Testosterone Nation at the time. If people are familiar with it, that was just like, boom, mind blowing. And Muscle Media Magazine, this was tied in, and that's where I think I found testosterone, because it was just like in this back sort of dark webs, and even the word testosterone, which still has its own connotations to it too, but it's like, wow, that's what these edgier strength coaches were doing. And I just felt like I had this secret box. I felt like I had these secret things, and I was starting into my exercise science program right around 1920 there, and just had this thirst for knowledge. I would just go read. Thankfully my girlfriend at the time would put up with that too, but I'm like, I was really just digging in to everything I could get my hands on, just unquenchable, until I felt like I had a base knowledge. And that's just carried me through everything and anything in my life too. It's like, if I value it enough to pursue it, or basically anything worth doing is worth doing well, like let's become really good at that, and then maybe I can teach someone else. Or at what point can I, which sometimes I still struggle a bit with, okay, at what point I'm really ready to teach this. But anyway, just dug into that, went into my degree program, was still felt like I was going to be the least qualified. For whatever reason, I just had maybe too much respect for the industry, which was so young at the time, and it was just transitioning from more of these like sports management programs into a more harder exercise science, if you want to call it that. But I remember showing up on my first day into our classes, and I just thought everybody be just these jacked monsters, and I'd just be this little puny guy, which I'm ironically about the same as I weigh now. I'm maybe a little bit more dense and quality muscle than that. And I'm like, I would look around, I'm like, I'm gonna be okay here. I'm in shape. It's just like I couldn't be good enough. So hopefully that maybe inspires somebody to be like, there's a point where you gotta go, that imposter syndrome. You just gotta kill that and just say, I'm gonna go for this. And what do I have to lose? It definitely helps to have a few people along the way, even your parents. Hopefully you can just go for, be vulnerable and go. When you keep feeling that or hearing that, the rumination, right? You gotta go for that. It just, there's so much. Now it's the other side of the coin is, I think there's too much information out there, if that makes sense, or too much a variety of information. It's hard to know the credibility. And I'm sure we could talk on that for hours on just that social media influence and those quick little fixes, and we're all entertained by that. I think on some level we're all enjoy that. I see something on like, oh, maybe I will try that in my program today. I'm like, why am I being enticed by this stuff? Or why does this stuff matter? So I often go dark now on my social media for days, days at a time. And I just need to think, like we had talked about in our little previous chat beforehand about the mad scientist. So I go back and forth, I oscillate and like just focus. I can trust my judgment. I can trust my filters. I still have good people around me. I don't always need the cloud and all this noise. I feel like it is too, but there's the nutshell of my origin piece. If you want, I can go into the Highland Games, of course, next too.
Yeah, we can dive into that too, but like exactly what you're talking about, like that social media side, you can kind of get stuck in the weeds of all that all the time just because it's people just putting stuff out there to like either sell a program or kind of get viewership or all those things. And some of it is kind of mad scientist-esque, and it's kind of people's thoughts and all. It's weird because it's like I remember like when you were like growing up, like some kids had like journals and like it was like your most inner thoughts and like feelings, and you hid it and you put a lock on it and you did all this stuff to like hide it from people. And now everybody's social media is that just posted out in front of everything. So it's a weird concept, but I go through periods of time too. Like I like using it because it sparks ideas or you can connect with people, but you can't do that all the time because like you said, you'll lose the fundamental things that actually got you strong or helped your coaching and helped your clients. Like that stuff is maybe like it's the cherry on top, or it's something that again sparks some different ideas of how you can kind of change it or influence what you're doing in a different sense, but it really shouldn't be like your big rock that you're touching on. So I know it was different. I remember T Nation, and I remember some of those old school ones, like when Elite FTS was popping up and some old West Side articles and stuff,
Oh yeah.
where that's kind of all you really had access to, or you gravitated to the biggest guy that was at the gym and just, hey, what do you know? Like just kind of let me be around you, and hopefully by some sort of osmosis, I can steal some information off of you in a way. But how did you kind of stumble on some of those obscure sports? Because you work with a lot of kettlebells, maces, Indian clubs, which I can probably guarantee that less than 1% of like college strength coaches and maybe any type of strength coach really touches on. And then that segued over to like working with stones, being outside, doing kind of odd strength stuff. And then Highland Games is pretty much the combination of those two in a sense. So like how'd you go from T Nation and like strength and like all your kind of degree studies over to being outside, throwing stuff, picking up stuff, and kind of stealing some of these Eastern and Western European like methodologies?
That's a good. Yeah, it's like I have to think back. It's like the when did your life start? Almost, it truly was like always in there, just outdoor kid and enough country living, and it just it made, and I definitely went through a phase in that 18 to graduating college. I'll fully admit I was like all in on 90% looks. I truly, it's so funny to say that it was like looked. Yeah, I wanted some strength, but it was looking good for the tip, like for the get the girl kind of thing. I worked at the gym in college, and I'll tell that story real quick too. I kind of talking about like stumbling into it. I had I guess I just looked around and like I had started into a few different science based degree programs, and then finally looking at that, I went to Central Washington University, a smaller school. I was looking at University of Washington, and I realized like, oh, they don't have a program. I could do PE, I could do whatever. And I just saw the curriculum, and I'm like, oh my God, this is awesome. Like I get to go to school for this rather than looking at all the typical things. And I just had a very classic Midwest upbringing. We moved to the West Coast when I was 14, 15, but very much pleased the parents. You go to school, you get the program, you work for, generally a private sector. It wasn't this idea of going into business for myself at all, that kind of thing. Get to that, I'm sure, later on too. But it was just so, this is the track you take. And it was, finally kind of back into that too. It's just like I started playing around with those things. And actually, imagine that you read an article and there was a good program in there, and you could actually do the full program. It wasn't just like bing, bing, pop up. It was like, hey, this person probably knows some things, has accomplished some things, and like it was a lot meatier information. So I would go out and do sprints or try to drag some of my other buddies out with me, and we test. We were doing our own, time in the trenches, actually testing these programs, putting it to the test, figuring out, okay, yeah, I do feel really like I'm doing all this gym bodybuilding stuff. I just remember being 19, 20 years old and just like coming out to play a little bit of, light touch tackle football stuff and sprint. And like, I feel so stiff, or even going, like trying to run. I remember one of our, I think it was aerobic education or aerobic exercise fundamentals or something like that in one of our classes, and going and doing some basic stuff. And I'm like run the track after being indoors like all winter and just doing the typical bodybuilding stuff, very little conditioning. I'm like, I'm getting cramps in my calves and, tibialis and stuff too. I'm like, what the heck is wrong with me? So that was like the first time I'm like, something's got to change. And then, just really kept going with the outdoor, like I think it's Brooks Kubrick, dinosaur training. If people are familiar with him, that's he's not doing that stuff as much anymore. He's still online. He's probably 70-ish now. But that really intrigued me to like, oh, this strong, and I love I guess there's another influence, World's Strongest Man, just amazing. Those guys were amazing, but never really wanted to be that big, and always struggled with like, okay, I want to have abs. I don't want to get too big, or I don't want to spend that much time eating just like a maniac. But I was always from 18 is when I decided to. I'm like, I'm gonna bulk up. I was the typical tall, skinny kid with enough base of strength and discipline to do the work. I'd been lifting, like I said, since I was 14, and very consistent with it, very dedicated for that age. But I just didn't, and form was such a big impact. I got my first job at the gym because the owner saw me and they knew I was an exercise science student. I'm sure you as overheard a little my hunger for what I'm doing, but he's like, you have great form, and I could tell like we can work with you. And that was really my first like mentor. Him and another coach who I ended up doing my internship went down in San Diego. But finally finding like that mentor, someone like, hey, boom, that was like a tipping point. Like, okay, you can do this in the private sector. You are, big enough, strong enough, good enough, people like me, kind of thing. You finally like fall in, like, all right, this makes sense, enough sense at least. Let's keep going. Couple checkpoints along the way, but still was doing pretty typical lifting until really getting out of school, coming back, feeling like I'm kind of tucking my tail, going back to my hometown, which is Longview, Kelso, Washington. It's very much still let's call it sleepy mill town. It's a bit depressed. It's a suburb of Portland, we could call it. It's by the beach on the relatively near the coast. So there's still enough selling points to make it appealing. But going back to the hospital setting, because I probably like you too, I wanted to be this elite professional college level strength coach. That's where my track was originally headed, but had enough of those influence and realized, okay, it's more stable here. Again, that stability bell just kept ringing, my parents in my ear. Of course, going back now, if I had that support, it would have been, hell yes, let's go in, let's do our masters, let's do this. It would have just been a different track. It wouldn't have necessarily been the right track for me. I think I've arrived to pretty much where I am now. It just was, maybe more destined to get there. But I took the clinical route, but still got to do a bit of everything. We had a small enough hospital where we had a strength and conditioning high school program, like a liaison kind of thing. And then I worked in the weight room there, and after hours, it's big grant kind of setup. So we had this amazing, college level facility there. So they wanted to fully take advantage of that. But then my time was really split, which was good in the early days, but I definitely didn't need to do that for over 10 years type of thing, and worked in employee wellness. So I got to get a feel for the community, what people are really, the pulse on what is going on in society or the trends. And I was super optimistic. Like, I can change the world. We can change this community, can lower diabetes risk. I was just really obsessed, and I still am. I'm just a lot more cautious where I put my energy, and a healthy level of cynicism and fear even of where society's going. That's a much deeper rabbit hole. But then I worked in cardiac rehab reluctantly. I was like, I don't have interest in this cardiac rehab program or this pulmonary rehab. I got to spend some of my time teaching with the physical therapy side of things, but I didn't have the licensure and I wasn't really ready to go back at that time. So I felt pretty limited, but again, got to do enough of those other things, got to introduce basically strength training to and pushing for that in our cardiac rehab program. I just, again, had enough forethought to be like, how can we not get them strong? Why are we just holding on to the sides of the treadmills? People can hardly walk or they have no base of strength. They can't get out of the chair. Then you're going to put them up on the treadmill. It just, the order of operations just didn't add up, thankfully. And now I feel like, hey, I could easily say, hey, I told you so. I knew I was right all along, but hindsight's 2020. I don't sit and dwell on it, but and our employee wellness program, getting more strength-based programming in there, and brought kettlebell. Had to beg to get some kettlebells in our gym. We couldn't get barbells in there, but we had some basic dumbbells, and I finally brought in some kettlebells back in there in those days. So I definitely had to pick and choose my wins. Where fast forward to now, it's just like the decisions that would take. You had to filter through like 8 bosses, it felt like, and really, Zach Evanish, just thinking of his podcast recently, he was talking about having to really, these aren't his words, but my words, like play nice and really the political side or very, very patient side, if nothing else. I couldn't just make those decisions. So I think that kind of brought me back into my shell a little bit when I first started my business of like, oh, maybe I do need to do all these like safe things and not, push that envelope too much. But, back into where I, got into the hospital. That was where actually the first year there, I was invited to our local Highland Games there, which is Kelso, Washington, is founded by Peter Crawford, who's a Scotsman, and the sister city. It looked like Kelso, Scotland, apparently from his eyes. So, enough of a Scottish community, this kind of fun event. Like, okay, I think, this makes enough sense. Came out with a local strength coach, B class, lower A class guy, super helpful, but he really wanted, he was skeptical. He wanted you to earn it. He wanted you to put that time in. And I did not do well at anything besides weight over bar. Probably kept me interested in the Highland Games. I did well enough. Like, oh, okay, that probably converts from some of my, other things. And I'm tall enough. I'm 6'2", but I'm like, okay, I just beat. And we had the other team. I was on the hospital team. We had the gym team. And it was the gym I trained at. And I'm like, I just beat some of these guys that are squatting and deadlifting way more than me. And like some light bulbs started kind of turning on at that point too. And that really set the trajectory with my training, my interests, everything from, I don't know how, same kind of thing with you have a better pulse on the college level or professional level, like even using kettlebells, especially back then, was super innovative. It was, very hard to even get equipment, bumper plates. I really had to, save all my pennies kind of thing too, to be able to afford bumper plates and a handful of kettlebells. And it just, the kettlebell went literally hand in hand with the throwing weights. And I've shared some of that over the years in different articles and things of how similar looking they are. Of course, there's more than meets the eye too, and you have to be careful with not just going out. But I was actually throwing kettlebells. I had 2 30-pound and 55 that I got for Christmas 2004. You can remember that really well. And like, okay, I'm going to learn to lift these, and I'm going to throw them too. And I guess that's kind of the second iteration of what you were kind of asking about, like the layers of where did this evolve from? Where did this outdoor, I don't mind like odd lifting maybe doesn't do it justice or sounds kind of funny, but it is. I mean, it's unusual. And again, I'd be right outside training outside of the gym, and I was always known as that odd, lifting guy, I guess too, because it was just so rare. Nowadays, I think if you saw somebody doing kettlebells, or when I see somebody in the park, I look around, I'm like, are people just seeing him as a weirdo still? And it's like, it's not at all. It's become so common. So I guess, I don't claim to have invented anything or been a, popularized, been one of the cool kids, but it just made sense to me. So I wanted to get outside. I just checked a lot of those boxes, and that, the functional, I called it like circus training stuff was coming on in the early 2000s. And a lot of it was, pretty misguided, as we know now, but there was, some great things in it. So it did open my eyes, after that college segue to like, okay, I probably want to, if I actually want to keep being able to, back then it was like more snowboarding and other, active sports. Like, okay, maybe I should do some of this injury prevention stuff or these other things instead of just this, typical gym based stuff that was not very athletic oriented. And now, fast forward now, it's really all about that. It's gone completely the other way around. Now it's like truly 90% moving well, enjoying training, just keeping myself relevant in some ways. And I had a client, I was at the orthodontist checking in. The client was in there, and I had left, and then I come out. This was another time I'd been there. She came back around, and they were the ortho tech or whatever was like, "Hey, she just thinks you're a legend. She thinks you're amazing. What you did for her, and the way you you competed." And one of the biggest things now is like, I don't want to be known like, oh, you were that guy, you were doing that. And she kind of caught herself like, but you're still doing it. That was the biggest like compliment to be, kind of recognized, which, I don't go around looking for that recognition, but somebody locally, remembering that experience they had with me, means the world. And then just like, okay, you've done these cool things, but you're still doing it on some level. Not that I have to be necessarily the most competitive in the world with whatever I might do too, but it does tend to come back around every this time of year. I tend to renew my vows with it tends to go back to the Highland Games, but I'll reach out and dabble into other strength sports too, because I generally want that experience. I want to get my butt kicked again, or be the white belt in a different realm or whatever too. So I could definitely go on and on into those areas too.
No, that's perfect too, because I think to your point, you can't be at the peak forever. You can't be at the top for all those sports. And like it's cool with Highland Games and some of these other like different activities. And even if you're not necessarily like competing on like a high level circuit, or you're going out to, like, I know you went to Scotland and did the Dinnie Stones and you got to do some of those odd lifts, and like that's an experience in itself. It's not really a competition. It's a rite of passage. And those are new kind of goals and kind of competitive things that you can do from a physical capacity, that it doesn't have to be on the platform. It doesn't have to be like ranked. It doesn't even have to be posted about or anything like that. Like you can make physical culture, and you can make like the iron game and like strength game part of your life. And it doesn't necessarily just need to be high level competition all the time. And that's cool. Like you don't want to be known, like it's nice to be known as like someone that did it, but you don't want that such a steep drop off that you just like, well, I'm done with anything now. It's for me, it's a hard concept because it's like I'm an all or none kind of person. So as soon as Highland Games is done for a while, I was like, I got to shift gears and kind of put it on the back burner so I can come back to it and like feel invigorated again, because I don't want to sit there and just kind of like float around in it. But there's so many different things you can kind of do in this kind of competitive field, whether it be as a coach or as an athlete, that you can be a white belt in anything, or when you come back, you can kind of be like a blue belt again and like kind of build back up to where you left off, and still feel like invigorated again, and feel excited like you were last season. And I talked to recently, the amount of coaches I've talked to in private sector or college or high school, like the cool thing I've been hearing a lot is like seasonal, like strength training. Like a lot of guys, like to your point, like, hey, around Oregon, around the Northwest, like, hey, there's a certain type of season when Highland Games is really big because the weather kind of fits, all the festivals, all the competitions kind of fit in this. And most people aren't going to necessarily be throwing in December and January because there's probably snow on the ground and it's raining every single day. So you pick a new sport. That's when you kind of go inside, build your strength. All right, maybe I'm going to start running when spring comes around. Okay, maybe I'll start throwing a little bit more. But it depends on like where you live, which is kind of a cool concept in itself. But the kind of thing I wanted to touch on, I know we both times when you were talking, you kind of mentioned it, like moving around, like, and you said like that imposter syndrome and like lacking confidence in it. As an athlete, as a coach, like as a business owner, I'm sure there's plenty of moments of time where you kind of have felt that. Is there any like one of those three that really stick out? They're like, hey, you kind of got over that hump. Like you talked about how you got over the hump and built that confidence as an athlete, and you had like some supportive coaches. Like when you kind of got to that coaching aspect too, like you talked about your mentor at that gym. Was there anything that they really did that kind of like finally solidified like, hey man, I can really do this, and then eventually to like take the leap to open your own business, Empowered Strength, and kind of take that off the ground and be in charge of yourself?
Yeah, that's great to think back. I mean, definitely for some actionable takeaways, especially too for your audience. Hopefully, it is leaning into, and I always say this, like it's like the student's ready, the teacher appears. I mean, I like to believe in that kind of mystic thing, but I don't know. I'm also, like you, all or nothing. I'm like, I'm not going to sit around and wait for this. You want something, go get it. You got to lean into that. Get out of your own way. We have one life to live. Let's go and let's do it now. And that's where, I can come off pretty strong, and my friends and family know, like, whoa, when you're going, and I've had those maybe mistakes along the way with kind of bulldozing through everybody else. I'm taking you with me, or I'm dropping you off from the Highland Games athlete side. Again, imposter syndrome, whatever you want to call it, just lack of that belief, or lack of, and we also have to consider, are we willing to do that? Now is more like, I have so much of that belief, but it's also like, now I know a better idea, and I can use the parallels between the Scottish Highland Games as an athlete. Do you know what it takes? And I always talk about to my athletes, how well do you know what it's going to take to add? I mean, sometimes it gets a little bit too nuanced, maybe with like adding 5 feet to their weight for distance. But I can truly say I've marched those lines. I've been after records, and after, like, I got to bring this event up. Yes, I do know that, especially on my hammers and weights, and maybe weight over bar. I can bring those up and really know what that takes. Some of the other events, like the sheaf or the stone, it's kind of mystical a little bit sometimes too. But so there's like, do you know what it really takes, or does the athlete know what it really takes as a coach, hat too? And are you willing to do that work? Now it's definitely more of that. What is the new thing that I'm passionate enough, that deeper why that we always, I think that's more common wording now. People like the Simon Sinek influence of the power of why. We do have to have that and renew that, or that can change, and we have, the right to change our goals, of course, too. But if we're keeping that goal, that one, the one thing, I really like bringing that in. What is that true one thing you can't live without this season, that's really got you fired up? Or in business, same parallels too. It was a matter of I guess just being sort of sick and tired in a way, seeing the potential for being able to do so many more things. I did take a half step, which was nice, and I really like that idea, that concept of taking a half step into it. Hopefully that's common knowledge, but I don't know if it always is. Like, why not give it? Again, we could use Highland Games, we could use any kind of athletics, or business, or a program. Go and research this thing. Actually, go and research it. Go bug somebody, again, back to the mentor. Like, find somebody that is reputable, or maybe a couple people if you really don't feel like you have the filtration system to see, is this person legit, or is this person going to like totally pull me the other way? Don't go sit on social media and watch those videos or these short videos. You got to dive way deeper. Read some books on stuff, and it's really cool to continue to just basically follow that same formula. And it just seems like so common sense. But then I realized, like, other athletes I work with, like, do you know the history of your sport, or do have you really put that in, or do I, maybe it's not, or I oftentimes don't think it's going back to school. I could go on and on about that too, with somebody in the strength and conditioning world that's in their 40s or 50s. Do you really need a degree to excel at this level? Yes, if you want to work clinically, I'm sure, in the university setting, or anything non in the public setting, you definitely need a degree, a master's or beyond. That's awesome. But generally, like, you could do so much with just having great mentors, doing some, solid certifications, and just being hungry, being thirsty for that knowledge, whatever, is just so valuable. So, again, it's just hitting a point of being sick and tired and saying, I'm going to do this. What's, and I like to weigh out, what's the worst case scenario? Am I willing to accept the worst case scenario with anything and everything I do? And I coach that way too. Okay, what do you not want to happen? What's the worst case of this? And what is the best? Can you accept that? go now. Does lifestyle match up with that too? Are you a new parent? Are you a new job? I have athletes in that realm right now, a new job, potentially going through a divorce, that kind of thing. Maybe it's not the time to really go all in on something. But again, if not now, when, in a general sense of like, okay, why keep waiting, or why not go in on the Highland Games, or why not do? And I definitely feel that coming into my 40s very much during that era. I'm like, I gotta go do. I had a plan, and I did some other challenges, and it's kind of cool to not have posted this, but I guess talk about it a little bit now. But I was all in on doing the Husafell Stone 2019, and I'm like, I gotta go now. And my girlfriend at the time, which is my wife now, she was all for it, and we just set things up. I just kept finding ways, research, talk to this person, spend money, spend more money on your sport, and hopefully don't go broke doing it. But like, what do I need to do? Who do I need to hire? How much, chiropractic, massage, whatever, what is this going to take? And I had a pretty, enough of a pretty good idea. I was so close. COVID shut down both attempts to go over there that year, and I just didn't go back, and I got pretty beat up. I was, after that, stone lifting and Highland Games don't go too well, or I think strongman in season. I can make that recommendation pretty easily to anyone. Don't try to do two sports that are not really, really well aligned. Stone lifting or powerlifting and Highland Games. I'm not picking on anybody. It could be yoga or distance running, whatever it is. Don't try to do things that are very different, unless you are potentially okay with the injury risk, potentially okay with being very mediocre at both. There's some examples of people doing seemingly extremes. I will add this for a fun little fact. I did win a pro Highland Games. I won and only pro Highland Games up in Canada. Legit enough to call it a pro win. And I won my class in a 5K. There's a fun little fact. Local 5K, like the 30 and over crowd. I think it was probably 32. And I was, I leaned down and kind of trained for it for a couple months after the season. So you had mentioned that too. Definitely getting like so far away from the sport. I think even maybe not watching videos, getting so far away that you basically find yourself again, after that season. Or it could be a career. I could, again, parallels to my career. I took enough of a sabbatical, or several sabbaticals in different ways, or I take a sabbatical every year from Highland Games, like renew that vow, or renew that decision to potentially go back to it. Do I really want to go back to it? And what could that look like? Imagine, and it just seems so common sense. I hope it is, but maybe not. I don't think people maybe marinate on that enough, or keep coming back to that. And that's what I push on for my athletes that I work with. We do, you touched on like journaling and write. Like, I want people to really articulate that and write down what you're going through, and keep checking in. Why is that really the same goal? Is that serving you? Are you beating yourself up all the time? Are you straining all your relationships because of these things? Again, this is where I tend to, excel now more in the masters men, masters athletes, or masters being like 40 plus kind of guys. But I still love the youth side of things. That's so refreshing, just to go to the high school, watch my daughter do track and be like, am I ready to go in and coach more on this level? Or, where are those opportunities too? I do have that missing that portion. So there's really no population. It really just, for me, comes down to working with someone who's willing to do the work, is truly, I think that the word coachable, I don't know. It's kind of like somebody who says, "Oh, I'm not dramatic," or I'm not into drama. Well, that's usually the most dramatic person. The person that like calls out, "Oh, I'm coachable," or "I know what it takes to be coachable." I mean, you see that too. You're like, okay, well, first of all, here's the checklist of the 10 things you need to do to be able to excel. From my perspective, at least, if I'm working with you, I need to know we have somewhat of an echo chamber. I don't want you following all these other programs from other people. And again, I know you get that, but it just feels like so many people feel so limited. They're just like, oh, you're taking away all my fun, you're taking away all my goodies. I'm like, I'm just here to give you, give me my best, know what track this is on, from, again, coaching it for so long, but also, leaning into that athlete side of things. And I could go into my wife a little bit too. She's been my greatest client already. I married my top client, is kind of the joke there too. And she has got a kind of created a monster with her a little bit too. But she has done things she never thought she would do. She would, her biggest thing is like, you actually, look me in the eye and you said, you're an athlete. She'd never been told that. She was a college cheerleader. She was a flyer. So she was, an athlete. She was a good track athlete, good dancer. Like I can't believe she would even think that. But, being a cheerleader, you don't get the same credibility, at least back then. But she's, Virginia Tech national, like second in nationals with her partner based stuff and all that too. So it's like, I never would have thought that, but sometimes you just don't realize that until you really, get someone on that level of almost discomfort and just pure passion, and they just see you on fire and just see something through your eyes or whatever. Inspired that in her, and that, in one way or another, kind of helped our relationship grow back when I was just coaching her, and growing, I guess, closer together, and then just seeing what she accomplished. She's done the tactical strength challenge, which has been kind of shifted around a little bit too. That's through StrongFirst for many years, and it's a really cool test. I think of there's barbell movement, there's kettlebell movement, and there's body weight. So that just makes sense to have test all three of those areas, right? In a simple enough standardized approach. You have a max deadlift, powerlifting rules. You have your strict pull-ups, 4 reps with body weight or weighted for the elite class, and then it's the dreaded kettlebell snatch test. So strict snatches for 5 minutes, as many as you can get. Set the bell down as many times as you want. But conditioning all those areas. And that's been a cool way for me to train, and was a huge part of my gym, getting people involved in that. To your point too, about people that are non-competitive, how do we empower them lightly, a couple steps along the road, or at least, hey, let's train as if we're going to do this. So let's train, finding something to train for, whether it's a 5K or whether it's, something you do in your own backyard. I like something a little bit outside of that. And, absolutely love hearing when people just say, I'm getting down on my knees and playing with my little kids, or I'm able to, I couldn't pick up my kid this time last year. And kids generally only get bigger, right? They're picking them up, or they're putting their kayak on their car, that kind of stuff really matters. But again, my wife was just had all this hidden talent, and seeing her hit these numbers. And she actually won her class last year. She's 50. She won her 50 plus class worldwide, and she's just done really well in the Highland Games. Very much, not, and seeing that through her eyes, that's kind of answering another part of the question of where I get my opportunities, my growth as a coach, I guess, too, is seeing, hey, if I can, somebody might give me a hard time for this too, but she did not pick up on the throws naturally at all. It's very hard, or sometimes the cues I really, even now, will very, quietly go around and, have a review a video. I don't sit there in her face. I'm not there with her 4 days a week all day. That would not be good for our relationship. But we do have some times, and I almost literally put on a different hat and like, okay, would you like to see what this looks like? And here, we'll break it out. And so it's really helped my coaching with her particularly. And, I'd probably say if I can coach my wife and she'll put up with me too. And she's making this great progress in the games at, 50 years old, all of 5'1", 120, 125 maybe now. She's allowed herself to kind of express her strength a little bit more in that way, and almost give herself permission to bulk up. Really isn't the right word, but just add that muscle density while she can too. So that's been really cool to see. But anyways, just on that track.
No, that's awesome. That's great to kind of work with different people, and obviously, like, as a coach, being able to kind of inspire your athletes and really bring out the best in them. That's what you ultimately hope you can do for every athlete. And it's cool to see, especially like when you get to, like, you work with general population, or you work with like masters level athletes, or people along, like, kind of fall into those categories that maybe aren't necessarily involved in a team sport, or they pick up an individual like strength sport after high school or after college. Like, you do need to set some goals for them, and there needs to be something you want to train for. And it's cool that you actually kind of poke at them a little bit and dive into deep of, hey, why are you actually doing this? And it's kind of harder to say, like, okay, well, if someone comes up to you and says, hey, well, my goal is to make sure I can get down and play with my son, like, no one really thinks of necessarily as a goal, even if they do mention it. But
Yeah.
it's not like you're gonna be like, it's not like a real, it doesn't seem like a way to like really train for it. So like you
Yeah,
putting in like those StrongFirst like competitions, or like, hey, like being able to play with my kids and jump on the trampoline in the backyard, like we're not gonna just put you on a trampoline and do kind of these weird things to get you like prep for that. It's like,
yeah,
well, maybe we'll go do a 5K and we'll do some other stuff that like all those strength attributes, like all the character traits, all the like physical development that you get from doing something competitive at like your level and your goals will translate over to like the real root of the goal of you really have. It doesn't necessarily have to be a weight room thing, but it's something that you can do in the weight room that'll tie back into your personal social life. And
yeah,
I think that's a great way to kind of do it, because most people will go in and get burnt out just doing a program they printed off or a personal trainer kind of gives them, and it doesn't really attack the root of the problem. And I think exactly to your point, it's the same thing I tell with my college athletes about like kind of reframing and like finding yourself after your competitive season. Like I've got coaches right now, like as we record this in the summer, they're like, "Hey, when are we getting summer programs?" I was like, hey, we just finished like the season, and I'll like tell them, I mean, I'm working on it, I'm getting them to you at this time, but I'll tell the athletes and I'll tell the coaches sometimes, like, and maybe not in this manner, in this tone, be like, I don't give a shit what you do for the next month. Like,
yeah,
you're a soccer player, like play pickleball, like learn to kayak, go climb a mountain, do something different.
yeah.
Like come back reinvigorated and like you want to do it. Because if you've only like ever played like one sport all your life and like, well, now you feel like you have to, like I'm doing this all year round. It's one thing if you're like one of the people that's like we said are all in and you're like, this is my life, this is everything. But there are still times like with professional athletes have to take a step away, even if it's like just to kind of throttle down and like work on technique, work on some different skills, like work on some weaknesses, or maybe just do rehab in a certain setting. Otherwise, you're gonna break down, or mentally you're gonna kind of tire yourself out to the point where you don't want anything to do with that sport. And it sounds like you and me do it naturally by just
Yeah.
touching on different sports, so we can kind of stay high in a different way all year round because we're bouncing around like strategically to different strength sports.
Oh yeah, I'm never bored. That's what's a little hard, maybe out of touch for me and probably for you too. When people are like, oh, what do you really want to do? What are you passionate about? And that's great. They'll say their family, their kids. I'm like, no, what are you passionate about, or what interests you? What's a little bit scary to think about doing? And it's never ending for me. That's this laundry list. I'm like, I'm gonna either have to live forever. At least I'm gonna enjoy the ride. There's never going to be enough time to do all these things, and I'll never truly, I warned my wife about that. I'm like, you're never going to be, you marry me, you're never going to be bored, but I'll try not to, fry you all the time too. I don't think I'm that like hyper focused or hyperactive. She might disagree with a little bit of that, but for me, it's like, I'll touch on this a little bit too, but I got into, more like tactical training, and again, found a mentor who happened to be a strength coach as well. So it was a very natural. We had already, had a lot of rapport and done a lot of things together, but some of this more, tactical based, I'm like, I can't, I don't even feel like I'm from a whatever functional perspective, being a new stepdad and everything, and having this house and family and these girls in my house. Like, I don't even feel like I can really defend myself. I'm like, I think I do okay in most cases, but I'm like, in Highland Games, if people don't know, at least one legend is like how the king would choose his warriors, more of the battlefield guys grunting and groaning, not the messengers, and some of the dancers might have been other athletes in other ways too, and not knocking the big meathead guys. Were not always the most athletic, but they could do some damage and had a purpose, kind of like a football team or something too, right? You have different position players for different reasons, but just exploring more of that, expressing that athleticism, seeing what probably carried over, where the weaker links are, and then even having a more skill-based thing. A lot of the same rules apply. I got into archery, and I really always wanted to learn to shoot a bow, and I just kept putting it off too. But so many of those same skills, in the way there's enough physical demand on that bow, feeling that kinesthetic awareness, and the tools. It's such a precision thing. I can't just go, Highland Games, I can still get away with a little bit more, even being a lighter weight, older athlete. I can generally, choose to adrenaline dump gut it out, go berserker kind of for a moment versus can't do that with those more precision tools. I'm sure there's plenty of examples that are not coming to my mind right now in the gym. You can't just gut it out and try harder. Or on the on the Highland Games field, but into that side of things too. Even taking up, I'm looking at my harmonica right now. I have no music, didn't have a lot of interest in musical talent, but like learning to do something very different, but applying those same consistency. Go look, and seek out a good coach and stay true to the principles. Don't just dabble all around with too many different things. So I hope people that may carry over to, I think, picking one area to really put more emphasis on. And you can have different seasons within. It doesn't have to be a year-long block. I like the year. My brain goes to the year too still from, classic strength conditioning, periodization, all that. But and to touch on that for a second too, I tend to do my Highland Games in maybe a weird way that I don't coach it with beginners that are super dedicated, but a lot of people are well served. And I'll do like an early season, or I'll peak for one game, and then I'll take a deload, whether depending on how much time I have, a week or two where I'll do very little. I'm still trying. Like some people, when they say they take a week off, I don't even, I guess, know what that means, because there's really no like off. I'm always doing something to work on a weak link, or going in like, okay, I'm still going to work on my, bringing my rotator cuff back into focus, or some other like carries and variations, or just some heavy duty yard work and chopping wood for the week. Maybe I won't really spend, but I'll walk into the gym and do, especially when you have a gym on your property, you're tempted to do something in there. And I like throwing stuff, of course, and sprint. So I'm doing something, but it's way scaled back and it's not on a scripted program. So I think that could be an option for a lot of people, or really serves me and serves people well. And I'm sure you agree too, like that burnout of the mental burnout, the long duration of the season, and also that injury bug, injury risk, it just miraculously starts to creep in. And it's almost like the psychology of that, or pain science, and that, which I don't know, it's a little deeper exploration that I'm doing. Or it's interesting when I choose an event and I say, okay, I'm going, Masters Worlds for Highland Games is in October. I've had some nagging plantar fasciitis, which has just been the most annoying injury ever, and enough of this kind of neck shoulder stuff. It's interesting how when I choose that, it's like I focus in. Some people may need a little bit more scripting, prompting, coaching, and that's what a good coach is there for too. But when you've been doing it long enough and you just kind of re-engineer it, or kind of go back through your steps, and it's interesting how that tends to just bring everything into focus. It's like the gym starts feeling a little bit better. Your strength starts coming up, your throws start going up. As much as I don't measure throws, I don't even generally throw a lot of actual implements. I'll throw odd implements like tires and all that random stuff to a point within reason, because it takes the pressure off of any measurement for distance. Almost kind of blinds me for that, and I go much more by feel and just enjoy, imagine that, enjoy the ride a bit more, and just get out and throw some stuff, which I do think everybody should be some kind of throwing variation, or at least to some of the Indian clubs and these rotational patterns, get people moving outside of the standard, sagittal plane kind of stuff too. They're able to break through some of these positions, and not just this pure, a lot more of this pulsing reactive stuff. I know listening to Zach's podcast, I'm like, it's so refreshing, having athletes, having anybody do carries, like let's do tons of carry variations. Let's, again, maybe lift some odd objects and apply the same kind of principles, and get people carefully back to, again, I talk about throwing, but I love the jumping and sprinting. I have a program that I created and wrote a book on, and last year, that's really a passion project, which just makes so much sense to athleticism, base, and the throwing, the jumping and the sprinting stuff too has just been so refreshing and daunting for a lot of people that haven't been doing that for years. Where do I start with that is often a good question. And breaking into reintroducing some of that stuff, and I'm sure you'd agree too, it's just very refreshing, brain food, get people outside, get some vitamin D, I guess bridge the gap between the gym and life, or the throwing field, or whatever too. I really enjoy that side of things too.
Yeah, I think you said it right there too. Like a lot of that stuff has kind of gone away, and it's kind of just where pretty much probably PE and like where it starts
Yeah.
in the youth and where that's kind of all disappeared. And like I think you're starting to see the ramifications of all that. Like
Yeah.
I don't know when it happened, but like I remember jump rope for hard or like doing
Yeah.
pull-ups like in elementary school and stuff, and like recess is gone. And like I don't have any kids, so I don't know like how impactful. Well, I could see how impactful it is now because those kids are the ones that like it disappeared for, but I don't know like what's going on at those levels with the kids in current days. But I think you're right. A lot of people don't know really where to start, like tumbling, doing gymnastics, like kinesis, like any sort of like body awareness stuff, like that a lot of stuff that's disappeared. Like I want to say if I like actually go back, I've been at 8 universities. I'd probably
Mhm.
say half of them didn't have kettlebells.
Okay, that was an interesting question. I was kind of curious what you
Yeah,
said on that too.
so
And again,
and
then you can get labeled as a little bit more of those odd in the industry, maybe to a point, and definitely in the Highland Games, I'm maybe known as that odd guy who's doing the stuff, and a lot of people don't like, they look at how I do programming and they're like, oh yeah, that seems okay. I might want to do, but then they gravitate right back towards the strength stuff. So I almost have to just say either I can't work with you, or give me 20% of this and make sure you're not just at least back down on the weights, and then we're going to focus on all on the field stuff. So to what you're saying too is, I just wanted to touch on that absolutely. And I work with enough youth, or keep a pulse on that, and having a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old and seeing where some of their challenges were, and then seeing them develop that too, like not being able to do basic body weight movements, basic squat, touch your toes, get down on the ground, up and down off the ground. I've found some cool baseline litmus tests for people to look at, as much as I'd like to be objective and always quantifiable things in my exercise science brain. It's kind of like it's a certain feel. I've learned that over the years. It's a feeling for me to a point, but it's definitely within them. If they get that feeling and I can resonate and I see that light come on, then we know that that's a keeper. That's something I can probably transcend other people too, or that fear factor and those odds and ends. But it's still nice to attach it to back to the competition, or something really meaty, measurable. Whether I have my whole list, we call them empowered standards. So there's like a baseline, which I've filtered through a lot of other coaches, and I always love feedback. I just haven't changed it. There's probably a couple tweaks I could maybe make now, but sometimes you don't need, if it's solid and it works, it doesn't need to always be changed. And they're just metrics for a push, pull, carry. We have our more kind of endurance crawl test. What else? Power measures. How do you do it in just one movement, right? You don't always have to choose one, but here's what we found is the best push, best pull, squat, and then here's the baseline of what we've found for life, really at any age. There's no age qualifiers in there too, because to be a capable, useful, functional human at 12, back in the primitive days, you had to carry your own weight, literally. And if you're 88, unless you had somebody else, which probably didn't ever live that long back in even 200 years ago, it was very, very rare. So it's like, here's the capable human standard. There's no age on it. And then there's the game changer, what to be a competitive athlete that would fit. And I use that for my Highland Games guys too. I think we get into too many details with, and you can probably speak to that much better too, of a percentage for this sport or that sport, of here's the energy demands on my sport, and especially way outside of the season. It's contradictory probably what I would have thought or said 20 years ago, definitely even 10 years maybe, of like what matters. Like we major in those minor things of adding more weight to the bar. I've heard that on a lot of your podcasts from other coaches, and again, very gratifying. It's like, I want to point on my athletes, like, see, I'm not just, look, you got to keep listening to what these other guys are saying that aren't just influencers. Or I love that some of your folks that are very quieter energy underground. It's like, what if we don't add weight to the bar? What if we work on some other skills that you're not as good at? I still want to feed into the things that they enjoy doing, especially in the private sector when they don't have a sport in mind, and I don't want to fry them. I want it to be, an enjoyable experience. But what if we change some of the metrics around and make this, like we were talking about a minute ago, on the play and and general movement stuff, that's where the foundation of athleticism comes, right? Look at how we developed it as youth. What if we go back through, a version of that, or play, it's crazy to think about a bunch of 300-pound dudes that are jacked and massive. Like, we're going to play some games, or we're going to do some, we have like kettlebell partner passing. We'll do these bounce this ball, and we're going to catch this. We're going to all practice getting up off the ground in as many different ways as we can. If people have seen and want to see some of my stuff I've posted over the years online, I think I do a good enough job of showcasing, like, hey, I do these things. I play and move. I move better than I did 20 years ago. Super proud of that. And all my athletes, that whenever we go to a competition for Highland Games or other activities, we're always the mobile, bendy, athletic folks. And I love that. That feels really good. You bring your group to StrongFirst certification, which is a very rigid, strict system in many ways, and I love that. Here's my students that I'm bringing with me, and I'm assistant teaching or whatever too, and like, okay, your people are well prepared. Their technique's good. They're mentally sharp and coachable, and they're doing that, and that's, I'm sure, true transcends everything you're saying and doing too. It's much more than just of course, adding weight to the bar. I hope that gets across, but it's very easy to fall back into that. Like, okay, here's the program I wrote you a month ago. What the heck happened? Like, this is not what we originated with. So I try to find that, and especially working with mature adults. It's their journey, but at least I can tell them confidently. Or if I can't, probably not right to meant to work with them anymore. I might have to part ways. But here's what I know will be effective, and we can still play around with this 10-20% variance and not be strict on your gym progressions, but looking at these other variables of what's important to you and to me, and then we just continue to build on those priorities, or again, kind of keeping that goal, or looking at and sometimes it's just very odd measures that just makes sense to me or to us, that we can both agree on, or in a small group it can be a little bit harder, but I don't mind being a little bit of that, out there side of things too.
No, I agree. I think people in the Highland Games community kind of know you for that too. And if they're going to seek out your advice, like, it's not a bad thing, but if they seek out your advice, like, they kind of have an understanding of what they're going to get. And it'd be weird to me, like, to seek out your advice knowing kind of what you do and how you program and how you train, and then be confused why you're not just programming like barbell movements all the time. And it's not that you're not doing that. It's you're kind of strategically putting it in there because you still want to show athleticism. You want to be mobile. You want to be able to, at the end of the day, like, for Highland Games, the only thing that's going to change in weight is a caber, and that's primarily technique. And then, there's some strength involved, but if you can already control your body weight, and you can deadlift a good amount, and maybe even snatch like a good amount too, like close to your body weight, or just high pull it, you're going to be fine with whatever you pull, unless you're getting something stupid heavy as a challenge caber. So, like, what's the point of necessarily just putting 5 more pounds on a 500+ pound deadlift when you can't touch your toes, and like, you bend over and you can't breathe going up 2 flights of stairs? Like, maybe there's some other things we could touch on to actually get you better. And it's weird to me that a lot of people that have like goals don't keep the main goal, and like really want to sacrifice a little bit of what they're training to obtain that goal. They just want what they want. And if you want a program that's just all like strength based, then do that. But chances are you're not going to get the goal you want by doing the things you're already doing, especially if you seek out a coach's advice. Like, that's
exactly.
They're there to tell you. That's why being coachable, like, to your point, is a big thing for a client that you're reaching out to, or that seeks out your advice, because you're going to often tell them the things that they might not want to hear on some days. You're going to try to provide some guidance to them. And if they really want that goal as bad as they do, like, these are the things they need to hear, versus go seek out someone else that's kind of just going to reaffirm the things that they're already doing day in and day out. And you're going to end up getting the results that you already have.
Amen. Yeah, 100%. There's my conundrum in a nutshell within the Highland Games and overall too. It's I'm sure you hear and see that. It's like, there's so much information out there, and there's so many people that can articulate that really well, or be able to sell you on on their commitment and their goals, and they're pretty clear. But then when it comes down to doing the work, it's kind of like whatever it's a newer country song. It's like everybody wants to be an outlaw until it comes down to doing outlaw shit. It's like when you really have to do the work, okay, then you see what they're made of. Or again, I would use that as a base benchmark of how coachable are you really, or how much, have we need to build some rapport, of course, too. I maybe get a little ahead of myself or whatever, just like it's so obvious to me, like, well, why do I need to sit and get all this buy-in with you? And then that just, fatigues me and creates a baseline of frustration, or this like kind of push-pull kind of thing, which we don't want. Again, especially in the private sector, where sometimes with young athletes, you either see it's pretty clear right away, they're bought in, they're ready to do the work. And then you got this, guy that's, usually on the higher level, has figured out some things on their own, and they've got away or got by with, what they genetically have, or some, some grit that's maybe hard to define. But when it, comes down to that, again, I'll just touch on the social media aspect. It's even with me, just be aware of what you realize you're looking at a straw. You're looking at that myopic little view of what someone chooses to share. And this is a good reminder for me to be careful that I'm not just showing the things that are exciting to me, maybe something that's most valuable to the person. Maybe this is for other coaches too, but beware that, again, you got to really look at what that person's doing holistically, or what they're doing with other people, of course, too. Just because you're doing that yourself, or you're choosing to share that. If I'm still grinding, you said this already too, but I'm still doing barbell lifts. There's still some meat on that bone. I'm never, I'll take a deeper dive maybe for a couple months. I'll try not to look at the barbell for a while, but I always gravitate back to, let's say, more traditional stuff than people might think too. So hopefully that's a takeaway. It's not always this, I'm not just swinging Indian clubs around, naked in the yard or something, and then I go throw the heavyweight. No, you need some strength. I need to push that button and get my nervous system going again. But I think it says enough to be able to, lift some heavy stones and going after, being close at least to that Husafel stone. Like, that's an elite level strength, and maybe no better test of strength, and a bit of like that muscle endurance side of things too. I'm sure we could debate that all day long. What is the key performance indicators for an all-around athletic person? And that's what we look at with each person, and to a point, what they're willing to do. Same for you. What are you really willing to do? And it's not going to happen right away. I want you to commit to this for a good 90 days. What at least we can digest this, and then you have a better sense, rather than we're so quick to judge or want to know. Or like kettlebells too, people just use them as an afterthought. In poor form, they'll use them as only a conditioning tool at the end of their training session. And I'm like, okay, great, you're doing something that's good, but there's so much more to this if we choose. I have some really heavy kettlebells and use them for a tool that it's just also felt really good to me. Sometimes the barbell just does not feel great. I have plenty of other people that just don't want to use the barbell. So it's kind of this paradigm shift maybe too. They're not married to the barbell, and we can do some really heavy swings or some really explosive swings, or all these different variations. I'm not married to one tool at all, but choosing those that just literally get us outside the box. We have some good options there. So leave it at that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I probably fall victim for that too, like kettlebells and some of the other maybe non-traditional like tools, using them almost as an afterthought. Like, they're not really the main emphasis of the movement. Trying to get away from that, like during different times of the season. I think at the collegiate setting, sometimes it's a little more difficult, because you really only have like 2 blocks of time if it's a fall or spring sport. Maybe like basketball or wrestling, like swimming, like where they kind of cross seasons through the winter, it's a little bit different. But like, hey, here are my 2 chunks of time where I have you guaranteed. Here are my other 2 chunks of time where I don't have you. And one of them is prepping you for the season. One of them is like kind of throttling you down for the season. And for me, that's like, one is super strict because you're away, follow it as close as you can and try to mimic everything you were doing while you were at school, and you might not have access to it. The other one is, hey, if you don't step in a weight room for a month or two, like that's your choice. Like you'll be fine. We'll kind of pick up where we left off, but just make sure you're slowly kind of introducing yourself. So when you get back, it's not like we're starting from square one again. We're picking up where we left off, like maybe at a
Yeah.
regress setting. So it,
Yeah.
it's hard to kind of put in some of those other tools, especially when you don't have access to them all the time, or maybe don't have the ability to like teach them in a bigger setting and stuff. So it's cool to learn from like people like you that have access to it or put it in there more, or have used it as more of a like this is my primary emphasis of the day. This is what we're going to do for the next couple weeks. Like we're really going to like harp on this and focus on it and get stronger in this and get more mobile in it. And it's a cool kind of thing to go through. And I like to touch on the social media stuff too. Like that's something people need to like really realize more so, especially like when it comes to coaches too. Like I said it before, like sometimes it's just like people's like whiteboard and thoughts of like, hey, this is kind of cool, this is interesting. It doesn't mean they do it all the time. There's a lot
Yeah,
of stuff
exactly.
going on behind the scenes, and at the end of the day, like context is king with this stuff. There's only
Yeah.
so much you're going to write down and like put in the description. There's only so much you're going to include in the video. Like you can't have everything. Like having deeper conversations, doing it for yourself and really seeing if it applies to like the set and setting of your athletes and like your organization is really what needs to be done. You got don't take it for face value. And that kind of leads into what I wanted to ask you too, because you talked a lot about like kind of that half step,
Mhm.
and really understanding a little bit more and kind of digging deeper into like for yourself, like, hey, this sport I'm kind of interested in. I'm gonna figure out like how it was originated, like who was great that did it before, and like learn the techniques. And then same with like the coaching side, like, hey, these are some coaches that I really like kind of idolize or kind of want to imitate in a way and see if this is the setting I want to be in. Like, how did you kind of take that half step approach, like leading into like starting empowered strength? Like, how was that kind of, when did you kind of realize like, all right, the half step's done. I want to do this. Like, I'm going to take the full jump and like bet on
Yeah.
myself. And
Sure. Yeah, that's again very parallels that, but I think I glossed over that a little bit too. I'd worked for got a job here in Bend, Oregon, didn't know anybody, kind of that American dream story. Didn't know anybody, knew I wanted to live out in this climate, this area, and live up in the mountains and do mountain stuff, right? So I set that intention, right? And then I talked to everyone I could here in Bend, basically, gym owners, and just kind of forced my way in a way, and had a very like-minded, innovative coach. And that was a long process. I convinced him to pay me to do a week-long job shadow. I just sat back and watched what he was doing in his gym, and vice versa. He was kind of pre-training me, pre-grooming me, but we both got to test that out. I don't know if I might have even initiated that with him too. It's like if you don't ask, you don't come up with a good idea that somebody can track. The answer is always no, or that idea is going to die. Die with you in the graveyard kind of attitude. If you don't go and come up with something creative and put some again extra thought. I think I've covered that in a lot of different ways today. Maybe I hope, but put some extra effort, dig deeper, think about it, step away, go back and think about it some more, talk to some more people. That's ultimately the formula. Talking to more people, and then quick segue into that. I only worked there for a few months. They were having their own financial troubles, and I had pretty much demanded being a salaried employee, and had some base benefits, which was just I didn't realize that that's not even hardly a thing in our industry. Like you got to make the jump, and I wasn't able or willing to do that right out of college. I had considered that, and again, that's where I said, kind of tucked my tail and said, I'm just going to go back and work at the hospital. That'll be a safe move. My parents will support that. I'm not ready to do my master's. I'm not going to go all in with my own funds. So I knew, or I decided at that point I wasn't quite ready. And again, came along, and this was when I moved to Bend was 2013, 2014. So it's a 10-year anniversary for me. But within that time, it was like, hey, we can't afford you. Christmas time that year, I'd been there for 4 months. I'd been with the hospital for 12 years before that, had the most comfortable safety net in the world and all the benefits, not anything, amazing for pay or whatever, but I was, content enough. We get so comfortable, content in that aspect. Thankfully, I had the Highland Games for my sanity, and I was starting to coach more. I'd always side hustled with coaching, but to answer that more specifically, it just was kind of dropped in the doorstep, and it's like, do I go look for another job at another facility? And I'm like, I think I can do this better, or I can do this my way well enough now, and I can go talk. So I did. Before I started, I wish I would have had a whole year to do this and been kind of half step in the water too, because there was so many things. And I think we get in our own way for sure with like the things that don't matter. Like of course your branding. I still love my branding. I love the mission, the time I spent into that, but I could have launched some of that stuff. I didn't need literally like a shiny sign with all my logos done in like the first 3 months. I didn't need to get any equipment. The equipment did not matter. No one would have probably cared. I partnered with another local gym who was training athletes, and that was a cool, combo that we got to have too. But then I even realized when we were considering partnering and going bigger into this more private sports facility. He was more baseball oriented, so it brought me back into that strength coaching, and we collaborated on a lot of good stuff. But within 6 months, I was like, I don't think he's gonna make it, which he has since shut down his facility and that. So I had enough of an eye in a sense of like, that's not enough of a stable rock, or that's not a person I can invest in enough. And I did just go finally launch on my own small. I thought it was too small of a facility maybe at first, just about 2,000 square feet. Nice, the gym garage thing in a more industrial area. So I got relatively cheap rent. And then I could go all really authentically with the tools and the way I believe in coaching. And it's not the mass numbers, the cheap memberships. It's much more, which isn't talked about as much, like the semi-private model. So everyone's on a more individualized track, but there's 4 or 5 people training at once became my bread and butter. And it's a harder model in a lot of ways, but it does have the potential to be more lucrative. And then call it true small groups, would be no more than 8 people. And it was much more of this community cohort. Like you generally had to come to that was your class time. That was your team you were with. So I know you talk a lot about that, or a lot of the other guests, like what brings that together. So we really had checks and balances within the group. So much more dedicated, and some youth programs that we went into as well, more specifically that way, or we would, really make people go through a lot of steps before they could just drop into a class kind of thing. And I don't know, I don't have as much of a pulse on what other people, not that I don't pay some attention, but I just don't care to look at what everyone's doing, every model. And we used a lot of odd implements, just to touch on that too. We brought those tools in within reason. I would battle test them myself. I had enough kettlebell experience. I'd done all my StrongFirst certifications at that point. And I'm like, okay, let's be more of a kettlebell oriented gym. But we were very much into, authentic barbell stuff. And even Olympic, I was digging in and learning how to Olympic lift, become a, mildly competitive Olympic lifter, and also realizing I don't need to do full Olympic lifts, and I'm kind of beat up from doing this, and it's not really helping my throwing, and I'm actually not very good at, good enough at this, and don't even know if I want to be that good at this. It was its own beast. And I just feel with barbell in general, I just feel kind of trapped. And I know other people can relate to that too. You feel stuck on this thing from the ego side of what's a good lift, because it's a lot more easy to make that measurable. And then just nothing in life moves around like this shiny thing with handles. So that's where it just keeps resonating for me to go into other areas, other measures of strength, or I could go on and on about this, but it's another topic another time. But on more the outdoor, like this outdoorsman, woodsman, hunter, getting really geared into that category. How do I be most capable? I've been doing search and rescue training, and looking at how people really move in the real world, and a lot of it, the mental aspect of these, multi-day trips and not having food, water, ideal conditions. And some people are surprisingly not very gym oriented, and they still have this toughness to be able to go for so long. So I'm really exploring that. That's kind of my next frontier in some ways too. But always fun to go back to those fundamentals. I know you get that too, as much as that doesn't sound weird to say, but those fundamental tools are just always refreshing to come back to, and and continue to maybe not PR on my snatches or my barbell lifts, but it's like if something does, if I'm kind of tapping on it a little bit off season wise, at least I can go consider pursuing that. What could that look like? That's probably more likely my all-time PRs are probably more in those categories, or the other odds and ends, and single leg strength, or something that's a very unique way to set new PRs, new standards, gain new skills, right? I think that's the answer to keeping it interesting, keeping it safe and refreshing within reason, as long as we're not introducing today we're going to max out on our barbell snatch, and we've never done snatches in our mobility guard, right? It's the worst thing in the world. I'm sure that just makes you vomit too, but we've seen enough of what that does to people.
Oh yeah. I think that's what really got me upset with CrossFit back in the day, when everybody was just following the main WOD. And I was like, well, if someone's just picking it up for the first time and they're just kind of hopping into what HQ is putting out, I was like, some people are going to die real quick. And
I know, right?
It was rough, but I think it's gotten a lot better nowadays, and there's more people in that profession, and different boxes that actually are putting people in more kind of skill-based groups, or ability levels, or not letting just anybody kind of drop in and just do what they're doing for the day. Needs to be kind of a technique base, and there needs to be kind of an introduction. And it sounds like the same goes for you. Before you introduce someone to kind of those small group team settings for yourself, they need to kind of understand where they're at. You're not just going to throw them into kind of a tightly knit culture, being in that semi-private setting. But it's interesting to kind of hear all the different avenues that, talking to you and talking to other people that have their own businesses, coaching wise, there's no one way to do it. There's so many different factors, how the coach wants to do it, what tools they have accessible, where they're located, what the kind of clientele wants. That's the cool part about it too. As soon as you kind of figure out how you're going to financially do it, see if you want to do a brick and mortar, or how, all those kind of questions, and not get too into the weeds of branding and all that stuff right away, because that stuff is fun. But hey, what do we stand for? What do we want to do around this area? Who is going to come in, and who can I coach? What do I coach well? What can I offer to these people that would justify them paying me to do this? And how can I keep them coming back?
Yeah, maybe touch on one other thing that's in that relation, that mistake I made, or something I do different, was I was trying to do too many things, started getting into the social media relevancy 2015 through maybe right before COVID, actually. And coaching online, I started coaching, but people asked me about some options or watching videos, and it grew out of I started in 2012 coaching people for Highland Games, doing online coaching in 2012. So another kind of, I guess, in early adopter, innovator, whatever, in that way. And then the brick and mortar stuff. And then I was coaching on, again, the online stuff, and trying to stay relevant there. Teaching, I also, taught a lot more in-person workshops, and would go travel, and, couldn't turn that down, was diving into a lot more coaching with StrongFirst and that too. So the point is, I should have put more emphasis and done more of the things that I didn't want to do. And, I'm glad I had a staff along with that. I had my right-hand man that I was able to bring on real early on, and, not basically make very little money, but I was able to lean on him to do the things that I wasn't as good. We were just a good team. So if you can find that, I think you got, for most part, it's best to go, unless you really have somebody super aligned with you, it's best to kind of go solo at first, and then you can hire on your team, which I did. Again, probably just was able to pay people real wages, give them some incentives for some extra work they're doing, which again, I never had in the hospital. You worked your ass off, whatever you did, you never make $1 more, you never get a tip. You might get a little attaboy, your 3% raise, yeehaw. Not very motivating. You're doing it because you love doing it. You're making a difference in people, all that. Versus, hey, there's nothing wrong with making money. Getting over that hump can be hard for people too, to realize, hey, I'm worth this. Whatever, money makes the world go round. I'm going to be that value will build in some level of commitment, some level of seriousness when you're able to charge what you're really worth, and serve the right people. again, quality over quantity. I had a small enough facility, so I could get away with that. But I would have gone much more all in at that time in the brick and mortar side. But now I've spent a lot of my time going the other way into the online world, especially we all to a point had to during COVID, and I really distilled down and basically sold off a lot of my my gym to my staff at the time. They picked it up and picked up the client contracts and that. So I'm glad it all worked out that way. Now I have a nice quiet space on my property, and I can do it. I can do all those things and feel good about it, because it sucks, and people probably know that already, to just be online or have to do look at a screen. That's just not how we're wired, not what we got into this industry, I don't think. Some people can deal with it or enjoy it, it seems like, and make if they're making really good money at it, that's theirs to decide. I've always come back to, and that's again another principle of our gym, is like, how do we reverse engineer this, like more people, more whatever, all these numbers and all this flashy stuff. Well, let's look at true results. Let's like unwaveringly just true results, which I take a ton of pride in. I wouldn't really do much of anything differently. Maybe be a little bit lighter with my approach, not treating everyone like they're maybe the elite athlete or this much of a strictness of technique. Be a little bit more fun and playful with it. But I take it very seriously, as you do too, that we don't need, like, let's not compromise very much on form. Let's not compromise on what the person needs within reason. Yeah, if we can switch around and do something that they will feel a little more successful at, a little bit more fun for them, all things being equal, yeah, but let's not take too many shortcuts or just give what the people think they want to do. Or you touched on that earlier, with all this expectation, all these cool things floating around. Let's do the fundamentals. Whoever says that has to be, it sounds like the worst sales pitch in the world, but it's like, it may not be fun. I just don't care to a point. Never did. And, did well enough at it where I felt really good. And like, okay, we can keep going with this. Again, that kind of imposter syndrome or whatever. I got to just go into this. My heart, my soul is just burning with belief in this. If we have that much burning belief, you got to do it your way. And also circle back, listen to their feedback, listen to other coaches. You can make some adjustments along the way too, but I wish more gyms would do that rather than just try to sell memberships, or rather than, and coaches too, their influences. I hope not too much by social media, but I think it's a huge influence for the people without a lot of background in the industry. They're easily enticed or suckered into this for buying the next quick fix thing. But to really dig into those true fundamentals and build that strength foundation, especially if they didn't have that at a younger age, it's just so obvious when you see it and feel it. And that's okay. It doesn't mean you're meant to serve everyone. And there's somebody that's going to run to the CrossFit down the street or do the fun, jumping around stuff. There's a few HIIT training gyms in our area still too. And it's just like, some of that stuff makes me cringe. Like, how is that going to be sustainable in the next 20, 30 years when we're already fried, we already moved poorly, and we're just going to add more fuel to that. We're going to stress our body out even more and get some endorphin rush and just not really make true progress, right?
No, I hear you. I think that's great advice too for anybody looking to do that, or like even if it's not open up your own facility, or you want to try to start doing, you kind of have an online presence in some aspect, or work with clients, or kind of dip your toe in the water.
Yeah, sure.
It's good advice to like really kind of bet on yourself. And the cool thing about it is, if you're going in solo, like, it's yours. You can do it your way. And I think like what you're doing too is like, and a lot of coaches fall victim to it, is like, rather than like shaping the field how you want it to be shaped, most people like are letting the field shape how they do stuff. And it's unfortunate when like in some professions, like sometimes that's how like you get a job. Like, you're kind of following the trends a little bit, like to get you in the position, or you're kind of doing what people want and expect you to do, versus like, hey, this is what I do really well. This is what I believe in, and this is what I'm passionate in. And I think that's what I know in the past has got me super frustrated with kind of being in a rigid, like collegiate, like settings, like, oh, well, this is what they're doing. They're having success. I was like, well, we're having equal success, like based off our level, and we're doing it our way. And I feel confident coaching it this way. And I feel I feel like we're doing the things that we need to do. It might not match exactly what they're doing, but you can't pinpoint what we do on the field, what we do in training is going to like translate over to results. It doesn't work that way. It's not an equal one for one. So that's my own soapbox of how it goes. But I know the private sector, like and having your own business and working with clients too, it's the same thing, but it's such a refreshing thing to be able to like put into your clients and build into your clients the things that you're really passionate about and that work and that would benefit them and like you can run it your own way. So that's just awesome. Hey, we could do this for a long time, John. So I want to make sure we kind of get out of here on a good note. So hey,
Sure.
like any good training session, we end the show with a finisher. So I got 4 quarters, 4 questions, and overtime for you at the end. So
Oh yeah.
feel free to expand on any of these, or if you got them quick and you can fire from the hip fast. But you ready?
Yeah, I like it.
All right. First one I got for you. Biggest influence in coaching and biggest influence in the Highland Games.
Oh, coach. Well, coaching. Can I can I say testosterone?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, yeah.
That's funny to say, but it's so true. I was like, I'm getting so much more out of this than my degree program. No offense to my professors, it was so aerobic based and just lost in the clouds. So I took that on. In the Highland Games was my he's a former pro, a little lesser known guy, but a big beast of the Northwest, Greg Bell. So that's another good example. Somebody I just reached up to, bugged him a little bit. He was a little very intimidating at first, but I'm like, who's the guy and when can I train with him? And that when I did that, boom, that's when I started reaching up to high level A's and into pros. It was absolutely Greg's influence. And then he was, influenced by Ryan Vieira and these other top throwers and that too. So I got to spend time in the trenches there.
Oh yeah, Vieira is huge up there. That
Yeah.
was one guy when I got to California. That was someone I watched a lot too, and hearing everybody talk about him too. Just
Mhm.
a lot of people's influence too. Hey, I got a follow-up question though for T Nation. Then was there any like specific like maybe authors or guys that contributed, or was it
Oh
just
yeah.
everything and anything?
Originally it was Charles Paulquin. Reading Paulquin, it was just and Paulquin principles. I have it right up there on my shelf. I've kept all my books. I'm like, there's all my knowledge in there. I could, if I ever want to go back, I can find something I can categorize it, maybe dump it out of the brain and put it, keep it in there. But there's another Australian strength coach, Ian King. I don't know what he's doing now or if he's still around. And Paulquin's obviously not around anymore. Rest in peace. But yeah, those were the two guys, and then there was some branching out with some of this other kettlebell related stuff that started coming out, and like I think even like Jeff Newport started writing, and that was kind of like a kettlebell. And Mike Mahler were doing some cool kettlebell stuff, and we started bringing that in to the high school level too. I just always had this interest in kettlebells, and again, I'm sure related to the Highland Games and just me not wanting to be whatever stuck on the barbell. We brought kettlebells in like 2006 or 2007 at the high school level, and got enough buy-in and started seeing the value. Dan John too. Dan John was a huge influence, especially back then. I have to say, man, he's probably the one in the Highland Games, not in person. So if I can say Dan John in the middle of all that too, and spending some time actually with Dan and mentoring stuff with him a little bit in person, and then in online and stuff too. So yeah, reaching up to guys that you're just like scared to talk to or wonder if they're even going to talk to you. And I still feel like that. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know. Now it's like in the hunting world, I'm like, I don't have all these hunting accolades, but what if I do reach up to these guys, or what if I bug them a little bit? And people often say that, like, yeah, I look for somebody like, stories over and over again throughout history of that, the kid that just kept getting in your face and saying, hey, pick me, or I'm worth it. I'm going to be somebody, whatever. Keep going. Or sometimes you realize like, okay, I'm not that into this. So this person is just an asshole. And there's going to be somebody though, if you're that passionate, you got any skill level, or somebody that will just say, hey, I don't think this is going to be your thing. You're probably going to be good at something else, but this isn't your thing. That's powerful too. We need probably more of that in our world. We're so afraid to offend and speak honestly. That's another podcast in itself, maybe too.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's good advice for anybody too. And like you said, The answer is always no if you don't ask. So, I mean,
Right.
find a smart way. If it's someone that like is really kind of out of reach, find like a unique and smart way to actually like do
Yeah.
something rather than just say yo in their DMs.
Yeah, you get that. I mean, that's another story. All this stuff. Like somebody like gives you the whole list of like all the things and sends you 5 videos and not like, hi, John, I enjoy what you do, or I like your dog or whatever, speaking of that.
Hey, so
Strange.
you kind of mentioned it a little bit too, like with hunting and like kind of the outdoorsman stuff as well. Like
Yeah.
when you're not coaching, you're not like kind of within like the maybe the gym setting or throwing. Like what are some of like maybe some of the obscure hobbies that you got going on?
Oh, I don't know if you call it a hobby. Oh, my yard and my renovations have been a passion. I'm sure it counts. I'm just sound like an old. My one of my friends calls me a yard farmer. As much as I am removing a bunch of yard of grass, so I'm going back to a lot of native stuff, and it ties in with my business space. And like we're hosting a Highland Games clinic this weekend, so I want things to look extra sharp. So that side of things, just anything related outdoors, and you call it a more capable human or man specifically. Like there's all these things. I got so into the strength and conditioning world, lived in small little places, just didn't have the dad that was there teaching me all these, from I'm taking a chainsaw classes with this guy, do chainsaw work, and all this wood cutting stuff, and all these again all kind of old man things, but just things I didn't pick up, and all these renovations, and just capable bushcraft stuff. Call it that side of things. I have a really cool mentor who's on the show alone, and just super inspiring. So I can again give you the short version for that, but that's truly, without getting too much into the crazy Rambo woodsman, paranoid guy, I guess, but kind of on that, being prepared, being capable of being prepared, and working with him on all these skills, and realizing I know nothing's, basically still in the hunting world, or being, with my bow or other tactical tools. I'm like, I have so much to learn here, and I have some cool baseline stuff. I'm very glad the mindset and the skill foundation of my athleticism and strength really usually works for me. Sometimes it's like, why am I not better? Why is this skinny little guy able to hike for 10 miles is very different than on a nice groomed trail, or 10 miles running, even compared to hunting and all, pack on uneven terrain, packing out an elk, really gritty stuff and really dangerous stuff out in the woods, I guess, too.
Definitely, yeah, it adds a little bit layer of danger to it for sure. Hey,
Yeah.
so if you weren't coaching, what do you think you might be doing as a profession? And if you had to pick a strength sport or any sport you haven't ever done, what would be like something that would interest you right now?
Wow, those are both, yeah, really really good. I honestly, I think I'm unemployable in like the private sector, even doing like all this rescue training and all these protocols. As much as I love and learning from very dedicated, volunteer based, I'm like, this is so rigid on this book work and standards and that too. So I realized like, wow, this is, I haven't been a student in the classroom setting for so long. So that's been very humbling. I'd like to think probably something in more the that physical realm as a guide, maybe a hunting guide, as much as I'm like, no, I'm not there. But if I went back like 20 years, something like that, something in the outdoor, adventure type of stuff, something where I'm teaching and coaching and connecting people, as much as I can tolerate. I'm glad I've been able to, dig into everything from social media to, embracing a level of technology. I'm so glad that sometimes a day or two goes by, I don't even have to check, or I don't check my email, for better or worse, or maybe I may miss a email from you about the podcast. But I mean, I love doing this. I love diving into this and having these opportunities, but also love being able to just go outside for a huge portion of my life. So I know I'm meant to live a huge part. I think we all are, to a point, for sure. It's like switch it around the other way. It's like we spend 10% of our time outside. What if we spent 90% of our time outside? That's challenging in all conditions too, but I've come a lot closer to that. What was the other? Oh, what would I do for a sport?
Yeah, you kind of were answering it almost. It seemed like, hey, just the tactical, like the outdoorsman like side. That seems like it's right
Yeah,
up your alley now.
I don't know, like anything from like, some of the lumberjack stuff. I grew up in a logging town too, so some of that might be interesting. I'd like to say strongman. I can't. I'm lying because I have competed once in strongman, and I would consider doing it again. But again, it didn't line up very well with Highland Games and the season and that too. So I'm still kind of a wannabe lurker in the strongman side of things. Um, what else? Yeah, it could be anything in those categories, or like the tactical games, if people are familiar with that too. It's a lot of CrossFit stuff with shooting, different shooting skills, and going out to the lots of range time and that too. Seeing that has a certain appeal to it too. Very gritty.
Nice. Hey, well, because you do so many different things, this one might be a hard one to answer unless you're just like hard set on something. But
Yeah.
if you're setting up like an ideal training day for yourself, like what music are you typically listening to, and like what is like your favorite post-training meal?
I remember, yeah, this one I remember from looking at or listening to Shane Southern, so I got to cheat a little bit and think about that one a little bit. And I'm going to just borrow from exactly what he said. Just something that inspires you, and it can be from no, like I like the certain discipline and quiet of no music, and a lot of time when I'm videoing myself, I won't bother. My sound will go off. So when I'm taking my bigger throws or something, anyways, or getting very technical, the sound goes off. And in Highland Games, it you never know what's going to be playing in the background, as you know too. It could be the harp. I've had throwing some really good weight over bar throws, and I'm just getting all amped in my own mind, and grunting and screaming practically, and then somebody's playing the harp right next door, and it's beautiful music, but it's so like does not add to that. So something that fuels me, and I'm a hard rocker at heart, or a metalhead that way too, so I can go pretty heavy there. But it changes. Nowadays it's a lot harder to find that inspiration. So if anybody has any tips, it's good music for me, I'm open to it. But I'm enough of like a just something that feels good. It's got a beat to it, and I'm I guess more serious on the redneck country side of things too. If I'm honest, I can go there and listen to that. That's where my harmonic interest and all that too. I think I'll quit and be a country singer if all goes well.
I mean, it's kind of like it's like your strength sports too. It's pretty eclectic. So I mean,
Yeah,
it bounced around. Maybe I talked about putting that together at some point in time, like maybe the strength game podcast, like a playlist
yeah,
for
I think
each like
that.
guest. I think that'd be pretty
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, that'd be
Man,
great.
I gotta backtrack a little bit if I do that, but that'd be cool. So
Yeah.
hey, last one I got for you for overtime. And they might be the same answer, and if they
Oh,
are,
you said
that's
meal. I got to answer the meal
oh
too.
yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so I might as well go. I'm very methodical with that, and it is I can't break that cycle. It's been the quality of the protein's gone up, but it's I'll do a whey protein shake, and I'll throw in a little more like honey or maple syrup. Do it that way, and I'll throw my green as much as I'm like I could take my greens at other times. I'll throw my greens in there and my creatine. Um, and that's about it. And that's my first meal. I've found I definitely I like to eat pretty closely after that too, because it just goes through no matter what type of shake. And I'll throw a little bit of whole milk in there nowadays too. So I like my protein shake and make sure I get my protein. And then it's a whole food meal, something hearty within a half hour is kind of perfect for me. And I'm, getting my caloric intake. It's awesome to be able to still say that. Like I still need to make sure I'm getting enough calories to keep my body weight, fuel the machine, I guess too.
Yeah, especially if you're going to be outside that much. So,
Yeah, exactly right.
hey, last one I got for you
Yep.
for overtime. Like I said, it might be the same answer, and that's perfectly fine. But like it completely in your own opinion, what would you say is the most important attribute of a successful coach and of a successful athlete?
The coaches has to truly be authentic. I know this is just not that exciting of an answer, but they just have to really, taste it, smell it, believe it, live it. Like that coach that you just see, or when the athlete sees the coach, just be impeccable is my favorite word for that too. Just be impeccable with just how you approach life. You're always learning as a student. You're putting that effort into it. You're practicing what you preach. Like I guess that's still more rare than I might realize or something too. It just something, I can't imagine doing it any other way too. Or if the day I'm not at least somewhat looking forward to it or teaching, I have to really step back and consider, again, perpetual teacher, I think no matter what, so it could take on, other forms, or maybe outside of the true, maybe I'm going to get into my like outdoorsman stuff or my chainsaw work or something. I'll be, teaching chainsaw classes or something like that, a little different. But my wife would say I'm lying. She's like, you're going to be coaching people. You can't help, I could go on and on with that too, but just that wanting to help society live, healthier, stronger lives is, again, as boring as that sounds, it's like I've been beating that drum really my whole life, but especially the last 25 years now. Yep.
No, that's perfect. I mean, I would say the same thing probably, like as an athlete. I think you said it yourself. And I think that really kind of defines like your business, like empowered. Like that's a pretty cool thing to be able to do, like to be able to teach and like provide those opportunities to kind of better yourself. Like you do that yourself, but like almost pass that along to the clients and athletes you work so that they have the tools to kind of empower themselves and like learn from like you whatever you're learning, you're passing on. And they hopefully perpetually like that starts to like funnel into what they're doing. And then you hope that it's kind of a snowball effect where they do the same thing, pass on that knowledge to someone else. And then, like you said, everybody's society will be in a better position because of one person. So that's
exactly. Yeah.
That's awesome. Right. Hey, John. Well, I like I said, we could go on for a long time.
I enjoyed it.
I really appreciate your time coming on today. For anybody that's got any follow-up questions, maybe Highland Games guys that are maybe seeking out some advice, if you ever have some other people online or in the area to do an in-person clinic with you, or just kind of reach out to see what you've got going with your business as well, where can they get a hold of you?
I still have a lighter presence, but they can check out my Instagram under Empowered Strength, or the old Facebook options. I am potentially doing more with YouTube as well. I have a pretty big YouTube library, but I haven't been as active on there. So that's, coming into the next few months too. That's enough of an interest too. And just if they want to check out my website, empoweredstrength.com is still cruising along too. So yeah, I'm enjoying where I'm at all around. It's good place to be, and not having to do the grind, go and starting the new business. So much energy just getting that clientele, getting that buy-in, and now to be able to find that it's easy to kind of just settle in, like, okay, this is what a good, comfortable place feels like.
Perfect. Hey, well, we'll link everything up there so that
Cool.
everybody can get a hold of you and kind of reach out and answer some of those questions, read the articles and everything, and watch the videos you got posted. But like I said, really appreciate you coming on today, and definitely someone I'm trying to catch up to in Highland Games once I hopefully get a little taller, maybe, and get definitely work on my technique. But hey, it was great chatting with you today, man. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, I appreciate your time as well, Nick, and feel free to reach out at any capacity, anytime. I really appreciate it, and love seeing all the different tools you're bringing to the table, and I'm learning as I'm going, from guys like you too.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it, man, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
That's it for this episode of The Strength Game. Thank you again to this week's guest and to our sponsors. Be sure to connect and keep up with our guests at the links in the description below. Remember to subscribe to us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast provider to stay up to date on all future episodes. Also, check us out on YouTube and CoachO'Brien.com, where you can find all the video versions of these episodes, as well as show notes, episode schedule, and much more. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in, and be sure to join us next week for another great episode of The Strength Game.